So I hear the term civil war being thrown around a lot, even in mainstream circles, with people who don't even know historically how things are lined up, just based upon the regular public education demographic. People are scared of a civil war. And I wanted to address that idea because a lot of the times these terms get thrown out there and people don't really analyze the situation. They just go on the term. So if you talk about the trans propaganda, the LGBT propaganda, you can immediately get labeled as a transphobe just from sharing your opinion. Even if they're wrong, they're not even giving you time to intelligently analyze the situation based upon whether they have any validity of being on that platform, being able to say to the world stage that this is the way life is, this is the way the world is. They've been placed there. No different than so-called white people have been placed on the pedestal. The LGBT community has been placed on the pedestal of attention, and it's for a reason. So when you talk to these individuals and you share your opinion without any intelligence attached to it, they immediately go to the term. That's their fail-safe. It's for people who don't critically think. They need things. So if you say something that they're uncomfortable about, they haven't researched, the term out there to shut you down for them to win the argument is to call you a conspiracy theorist. You talk about trans stuff, they call you a transphobe. You talk about race issues, they call you racist or a reverse racist. There's always something there that's simple for them to use to control the dialogue, maintain the narrative, and demonize you at the same time. The same mechanism that's used in that idea, catering to simple-minded people who do not critically think, is this idea of civil war. These terms are meant, they're put out there because simple terms like that, they're designed to elevate simplicity against intelligence, because that simplicity is backed by numbers, people. So if they have a bunch of people that believe what they're saying behind them, it doesn't matter how much intelligence you bring to the table. They have the status quo of awareness, their limited awareness, against your actual unlimited awareness. So the questions I bring to this discussion are, when people automatically jump to that idea of, okay, well, this is what it is when you're talking about, for example, race and civil war. Well, who is this civil war between? Very loosely, it's between so-called white people and black people. So if the civil war is based upon race, the question is not only who has benefited from race, but who has created the idea of race to add up to a power in order to cause a civil war against people who were already here. See, this idea of civil war only exists in the mentality of people who haven't done the research, who don't know the whole story. So if you can deduce that race was created by a certain demographic to maintain control, to elevate a certain group of people and lower another group of people for a purpose, for power, for control, for illusion, for deceiving people. If race, which is what civil war is based around, if race was created by a certain demographic of people and they are part of that civil war, then the civil war is actually being created and emphasized by a certain demographic of people. See, when you actually think about it, we as a people, we don't have the same power in their world as the people who push their world on the rest of the world. They are losing their power over their illusory world on our land and have to suck us into the illusion of race in order to play their game of civil war. And since people are so simple-minded, cannot think for themselves, they will play that game because the game is on TV, it's on social media, it's on the radio, it's in the world. So when so-called white people come up to us, when we're sharing information, historical information, facts, factual information on how things added up to where they are right now, and then people hit us with, oh, well, you're just adding to the problem of a civil war coming. Hold on. Pump your brakes for a second. Sharing historical evidence of why things are the way they are has nothing to do with causing a civil war. So people who share that perspective are already removed from the equation. You are so far gone that in an intellectual discussion, you're not even there. So that's one way that they dismiss, deflect from, and demonize where you are coming from. You don't even have the ability to speak in reference to your own story because your story is irrelevant. What's relevant to them is war. They love the war. They need the war. The war maintains their relevance, their existence. If they don't have race, if they don't have war to protect that race, they don't have power. They don't have control. The idea of a civil war is to maintain and expand upon their control while also demonizing you and burying you further underneath the foundations of which they built on top of your existence. So who created and still emphasizes these racist issues? We don't own the news stations. We don't own Hollywood. We don't own the movies. We don't own the main programs that pump out this idea of race and racism. That is all owned by one demographic of people, the illusory demographic of people who say they have control over the whole country and they are the original Americans. The fight against you is not necessarily to defeat you. It's to maintain what they already have. So if they have to use you again to maintain those illusions, they will. They do it every day in the movies, in the radio. Every angle is designed to maintain power over you. You're dumb, you're savage, you're over-sexualized, you're criminals. All across the board, you represent like blackness. Everything black is bad. Everything white is good. This is what the Civil War idea is. So before you get to intelligently analyze the situation between black and white and race issues across the board, you have to be consumed with the idea of a civil war, black versus white. So a civil war at this perspective would be a war between the most ignorant of people in the world, or in this country specifically. That war would be people who would not even entertain the fact that they invaded this country and took over and slaughtered the people who were already here. They forget all of that, and they only focus on what they have built upon those blood and bones. The other group is just us, who once again, who are just here defending ourselves against the illusions that were put upon these, that were put out by these people hundreds of years ago. This is the same war. It's the same illusion. And yes, they will have people who are not so-called white fighting for them against us, telling us we don't need to be talking about historical facts because it's adding to the idea of civil war. Why? Because they themselves are as ignorant as the people. They believe the stories that they put out there in the school system. So they are as ignorant as the people that they claim to be different from. Oh yeah, well those are the white people. We're the good black people. We don't want a war. You shouldn't talk about race. We should talk about humanity and oneness. And even further, people talk about the cabal and the Illuminati and all that other shit. Whether it's the cabal, the Illuminati, or the aliens, or however you see it as one simple thing, the story between black and white is still alive and well. And largely, a lot of those other stories are out there existing to distract you from that, from dealing with that. So we're not the ones creating the race issues. We're not the one maintaining race issues. We are in defense. We are defending ourselves from this. We didn't create laws. We didn't create slave catchers. We didn't do any of this garbage that's out there adding to why we are attacked racially. That is solely on one side of the story. And see, you can't talk about that because they want to see everything as equal. If you talk about racism, then they want to see you talking about reverse racism as if it's equal to racism. No, the way we react to a system is not equivalent to the origin of that system. There was an intent, there was a purpose why it was created. And in all the things that happened when it was created, we had to adjust to, we had to defend ourselves from. And how we defend ourselves, how we heal ourselves, is not in reference to an equivalence of we also created a system that's equivalent to, no, we are reacting to that system. But like once again, the people who are ignorant of the story, also people maintain ignorance because they don't want to see the whole story because it maintains how they are right in this equation. They don't want to see how you are defending yourself. They only want to see how your movements maintain the illusion of violence. You defending yourself against their violence is violence. And that's what this whole Civil War idea is based upon. Self-defense is not violence. Self-defense is preservation. We are trying to preserve our people, preserve our land, preserve our resources, preserve our history, preserve everything that is still near and dear to us as a people. We are preserving that. This world, this system is based upon building on top of those things, destroying those things so they don't get seen for what they are. They're not based upon preservation. They're based upon this idea of evolution, the future, building, creating all this garbage on top of the blood and the bones of our people. So when you talk about Civil War, you need to analyze what that stuff is based upon. The math is simple. A Civil War of today, the way people are talking about it, it's simply between black and white. The Civil War of the past was between so-called white and white, Southerners and Northerners. And what were they fighting for? What were they fighting to protect? Control, power, ownership over you and the land. See, the original Civil War was still started between them. And you were still just a pawn in that game, just as today. Power over you. What are they doing with the Democrats and the Republicans? It's the same shit. They're fighting for power over you. They all work in the same game. They all receive the same privileges and all the same. They get all the same shit. And where are you in there? You are no different than a slave. You are a piece to be moved around the board. So this Civil War, you were a pawn back then. You're a pawn right now. No different than how Democrats push how they are so about so-called black people and all this other shit only when the election time shit comes around. As soon as they're done, you can fuck off. They don't want nothing to do with you. In fact, you're a problem. You're back to a problem again. So so-called white people who are starting to see that they are part of this problem, some of them don't want to see that. So they will they'll double down on how you are the problem. So this is where that reverse racism comes in. This is where Stop Asian Hate comes in, because you're beating up Asian people and all the other garbage that's out. You're beating up trans people, all this shit, anything to make them or other people the victim, because it makes you the aggressor. Whatever that is it takes the attention off of them. So when you talk about a civil war, you can't talk about us as being equivalent to what you projected onto us and the whole world. It doesn't work like that. Not only that, is that there is no idea. This idea of civil war is a fucking mind explosion of nonsense. There's nothing civil about war. The only people that can have a civil war in the world is so-called white people. Even their war is nice. The Civil War from back in the day, it never ended. How could you start a new civil war if the old civil war never ended? Racism never stopped. Slavery never stopped. The power and control over us never stopped. The deception never stopped. It's all been the same, and an evolution of that sameness. So in closing, who is calling for this war? Who is pushing this idea of war? Who has elevated the idea of civil war? What platforms were used to maintain this idea of civil war? Were so-called black communities talking about let's do a civil? No. This mentality has been pushed by a certain demographic of people. Why? Because it maintains power and control over you. You can't even speak for yourself. Another reason why this is coming up is because so-called black people are starting to see the depths of how far this shit goes. We're starting to own our power. We're starting to make our connections back to the land and the resources and the actual history. We are really digging into who and what we are on a level that so-called white people can't go. They cannot go there. Because if they do, they'll go back to Europe. And then if they go back to Europe, then they'll have to go back to somewhere else that they're uncomfortable with putting in history books. So they don't. They don't want you to know where they come from. They don't want you to know how the real history is out there. They want you to know, believe, and defend what they have told you to know, believe, and defend. So once again, let's go back to the war in this civil war. Who has all the power? Who has all the control? In a war, the people with power and control are the ones who cause that war. We do not have that power and control. We don't even have that fucking organization. Our communities aren't even organized. We don't even have grocery stores in our cities. In our neighborhoods, we don't have the basic human resources that we need to survive. We are ill-equipped for a war. We are ill-equipped to just survive. We are incapable of going to that war, let alone calling for a war. Once we become organized, that's a different story. So we're not even there yet. So-called white people are organized off the jump because they have the organization of the government. The news stations, the government, all this other stuff, it's them that are talking about this idea of civil war. It's those systems that are actually pumping out there on their news media, in their movies, all over the place. They are the ones pushing for this idea. The so-called people, white people don't want to see that. They don't want to acknowledge that that's happening. Why? Because it gives them power. And if you address their power directly, they feel insecure. And then when they are faced with their insecurities, they have to ad hominem attack or reverse Uno card it back to you as if you're the problem. You're the equivalent to us. If you say we have white problems, then you have black problems, and they're worse than our problems. So you're the problem. And then the discussion ends there. Why? Because they own the narrative. They own the dialogue. You can't even dig yourself out of the hole of savageness. You can't even awaken your voice of intelligence because you're not even seen as human. You're still subhuman. You don't have the intelligence to speak. You're purely emotional. When in fact, all of these systems that are out there are based upon triggering emotions. If anything, our emotions have been completely burnt out. We've gone through enough. We're beyond that. So-called white people are the ones that are in their emotions right now because they're out of their privilege. They're losing their privilege because the story is exposing them. So when you go from that place, because they were in a space of this idea of being level-headed because they're not as emotional, only because they had this power and control. They don't have to be emotional when you have everything. What do you got to be emotional for? You have everything. You got your food, your water, your clothing, your resources, your security, your love. You have everything. You got your country. What do you have to be emotional? You don't. Now we are starting to come out of our illusions, and now they want to put that label on us as if we are emotional. And when we are emotional, we are dangerous and we are savage-like. And that is threatening to them. That is also a tactic used to control us and limit our movement, limit how we even see ourselves, limit how we come together. So who is calling for this civil war? Well, who called for racism? Who called for power and control over other people based upon race? Was it us? No. So there's your first foundation of who's actually behind this idea of civil war. The why behind that is because if they don't trigger the emotions of blackness and whiteness to fight amongst themselves in this illusion, then they don't have any other illusions to pull from. There's no protection out there. So-called white people are in power and in control. They're because of illusions, not because they're smarter, but because they maintain these illusions over us, and we have adopted those illusions. Another part of this, who has all the weapons? And the weapons are not guns and bombs and all that other shit. I'm going to talk about in Civil War, only those. The weapons are power, control, industry, resources, land. Who has all of that? Are we equipped to match that in a so-called civil war? Absolutely not. So it's not us pushing for this idea of war. It's a certain group of people. Once again, they will not talk about that. What is being fought for in this civil war? What do we have to fight for? We don't have anything. The only thing we have is the truth. That's what we need to defend. And you don't need to defend it in a civil war. The truth defends itself. When they're talking about civil war, when they did it back then, what were they defending? Same thing they're trying to defend now. Power control over you, resources, money, land. When they were fighting amongst themselves. Now they have to create an illusory war where they are fighting against you. But we're not that kind of people. That's not who we are. They could have a civil war between them because that's how they are. We are not like them. We are very much different. And this is why they want to maintain that war, to suck us into this illusion so it makes it look like we are the same. No. We don't need to go to war to get things done. We have intelligence. Intelligent people don't go to war to get whatever it is they need done, if they can get what they need done with intelligence. The lowest part of that totem pole is war. War is on par with emotions. If you are limited to your emotions, you are a very simple being, and you will only go so far. This is what the mainstream media, social media, the education system, politics in general, this is what all that stuff is doing to maintain people in mass in their emotions, because you are easily controllable. That is why they have Democrats and Republicans in politics in general out there, to make it look like, because they could just lie to your face to make it look like you have power. And they call it voting. Bullshit. They control how you vote, where those votes go, what all that stuff means. They control the people that you're voting for. They control the land that you're voting on. Everything across the board is controlled. So you have no power in that discussion. So what's to gain in a civil war? What's to gain in this war? What do we have to gain in this war? We don't have anything to gain when we don't have the resources to go to war. We have everything to lose. Like gentrification. Gentrification is a war. Are we causing that war? Are we at war in that? No. We are being attacked in that scope. And we are having to defend ourselves. And in many cases, just leave, vacate the area because we're being pushed out. That is a war. That kind of war is very similar to the wars that are going on with these protests that are out there. Black Lives Matter on the streets, all this shit that's going on. Who is pushing that? Does Black Lives Matter represent us as a people? Absolutely not. Where does the money come from behind that? Soros and company. They are the ones controlling that war, those battles back and forth. As people like Soros are controlling the battles and the wars between Black Lives Matter, so-called white people are controlling the battles and the wars between so-called white people and so-called black people. It's the same shit. One individual can emphasize and push a war in Black Lives Matter and protest, just like a whole demographic of so-called white people can push and control a war between races. And what happens when they gentrify? What happens when they come in that war move and push you out? They come in and destroy. Before they push you out, they destroy your neighborhoods. They suck the life out of it so they can push the prices all the way down. So when they want to buy that land, they can buy it on the cheap. They get two birds with one stone. They get to buy it for cheap and they get you the hell out of their way. So they destroy you. A civil war would be to destroy you in order to build back on the blood and the bones of that destruction on the cheap. Gentrification could be seen as a war move on a neighborhood level, on a city level. Civil war is equivalent to gentrification on a nationwide level. And when they go nationwide with this so-called civil war, civil gentrification, the nationwide move is to push an international move, a move that affects the whole world. So just as they push themselves into other countries with war, with manipulation, they're pushing themselves into your communities to get you out, to control you, to take you out, in order to take over that land, take over those resources, and further demonize you. Because once again, who controls the media? They will tell you how to think about certain people. This is why a large majority of so-called white people see us a certain way, react to us a certain way, respond to us a certain way. We can. Just the other day, I was in a fucking ice cream shop, and some lady, I thought this is shit we only see on videos. This lady was walking with her family. I think it was an Indian lady walking past another family, so-called white people, and all I heard was, "Don't say anything to them. Don't worry about them. They don't speak American." This shit happened in real life. Not only that, I heard what she said, but it was so unbelievable. I was trying to listen again to see if that was true. And she fucking repeated herself. "Come on, babe. They don't speak American. Let's just get out of here." Real life. That family leaves. The other family leaves too. As they're leaving, other people come to defend her. This old white man standing in that ice cream shop had the nerve to say, "It wasn't racist. It wasn't racist." Whereas at this point, he's just talking to the air. Me being a part of the air, I decided to stand up and explain how it is racist. This man was so embarrassed. He was looking so bad in that situation that his nephew, his like 12-year-old nephew, had to come up to me and explain to me how his uncle is autistic and don't take him seriously. I don't give a fuck about any of that shit. I explained to the young man exactly what this situation was about. He walked away. But this is how far that goes. You can see in that situation. Him defending those people. What is he doing? He's trying to defend his status, his people, his ability, the way they look to the world. That's what he's defending. Even when they're wrong, that's what they're doing. And what happens when they get exposed for doing that, defending wrong shit, doing wrong shit, causing problems? What happens? They become the victim. Because that's another way to control. So that's what happens. It's in their kids' reactions. It's in the way they raise their children. We had generational racism coming afloat in this ice cream parlor. So, as that conversation is dying down, because he went hard, he started going into, oh yeah, well, because I told him he doesn't have the authority to tell us what racism is. And then that's what triggered him, because he started going into, motherfucker this, fuck you, fucking, oh, I'm fucking racist, I'm privileged. He went off hard in an ice cream parlor around all these kids, mind you. He just kept repeating himself. It was nothing else to discuss anymore. I let him just yell himself out. At this time, I'm looking outside, and now the husband of that one lady who was talking about that they don't speak American shit is now in the face of the husband of the Indian lady who has a sling on his arm. And as soon as I walk out the door to make sure that this man doesn't do anything physically to this family, as soon as I walk out the door to see, that's what I walk in and hear this man chest bumping up in his face, the dude with a sling, calling him a coward because he doesn't want to do anything. This dude is trying to instigate a fight with a man in a sling and with his family and calls him a coward. This is how far gone these people are. They have no legs to stand on. So the only thing they have to do is to demonize you and pull you into an emotional sphere in order to control you with the emotions that they impose on you, trigger within you. They have to suck you in to that game in order to fight you. This is what this whole idea of civil war is. They have to formalize a fight. Calling, or at least talking about a civil war, is formalizing whiteness. It's formalizing blackness. It's going further and further into the illusions. And so-called white people are not only perfectly okay with that, they are game. They are ready to go because their whole world, their function is based upon those illusions. So when the system pushes to expand those illusions, those individuals, whether consciously or unconsciously, are on board. They are ready to go. Let's fucking go. Let's push these illusions because we need to take our country back. We need to take our power back. We need to take back control over these people who think that they have power now. Oh, you think you have the right to speak to us? Okay, we'll just go to civil war, bitch. How about that? This is where it is right now. And since those so-called powers that be are instigating this, there will be no accountability. There will be no justice. These systems are not interested in justice. Justice is a word put out there for illusory groups, no different than this idea of blackness is pushed out there for Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is not for so-called black people, so they are doubling down on the illusion of a white America. This is no different than white South Africans doubling down on their ownership and control over South Africa, maintaining a white South Africa, killing people for a white South Africa. This is what's happening here in our country. White South Africans don't want to go into the genocide that happened in Africa by a coalition of so-called white nations. The European nations went down there and attacked that. They caused that war in Africa. They caused these wars here in the United States of America and all over the Americas. They are causing these wars. And in order to justify their wars, they have to demonize you and belittle you. Tell you that they're doing this for you. When you start talking back, that's when you become a problem. It's like, okay, well, we need to keep you in line. We are talking about our original connections to our culture, our people, our land. This is a direct threat to those who live upon illusions. So when you dive into your earth, your soil, your culture, who you are, your family, your actual truth, when you dive further into that, they need to suck you back into those surface layer illusions. And these surface layer illusions are the illusions of blackness and the illusions of whiteness. They're doubling down on this shit with this idea of civil war because they have nowhere else to go. Those illusions are crumbling. Even white people are starting to realize that whiteness is an illusion and it's used for power and control. Once so-called white people start to speak against their power and control, that's when they have to suck them further into their whiteness because they're not going to let that go. They're not going to sacrifice their whiteness for justice. Not when they get all this shit from whiteness, no. So this is their only move. But like I've been saying in previous videos, they don't actually have to do that because just the illusion, just the thinking about that, the story out there is enough to project people into this mentality of human. We're all human. Let's fight the real war against aliens and extraterrestrials who are living under the earth or whatever it is they want to push out there. They just have to fear and instill that fear and scare tactics into you enough because the ultimate move after in this whole discussion, like I said earlier in this video, they are using a civil war to gentrify the nation only to gentrify the whole world. Because once they push the power and control over the world, so-called unify all these nations, they're not unifying it to bring people together. They're unifying it to maintain control over all of that. Like the Patriot Act. They're not creating the Patriot Act to fight terrorism. They're creating the Patriot Act to attack you, to investigate you, to spy on you. A civil war is not for what? It's not for anything positive that they're saying. It's to maintain power and control. So to put the final nail in this coffin of civil war, this is where it stands right now. This is not something that we are pushing. This is something that's being pushed by people who push illusions. They push the illusion of blackness. They push the illusion of whiteness. They push the illusion of Americana. They're pushing the illusion of Western civilization. And they're pushing the illusion of the implosion of that through a civil war only to maintain control and push the narrative even further. Anything beyond that is people getting in their emotions because they have nowhere else to go.